Hello everyone, my name is Maria Ferrer and I am a fifth year educator for middle school and high school science. I am focusing my presentation today on interactive Jeopardy! It's a form of game-based learning utilized to engage students, review relevant content material, and assess overall levels of understanding within the classroom. I know personally for myself, I've relied on this tool a lot over the years, and it's proven to be pretty successful with respect to my students. First, I would like to start out by providing you guys with a little bit of background information as to the focus of my learning activity. You can see that the title of my presentation is Game-Based Learning, Engaging Science Students Using Interactive Jeopardy! Essentially, I have created a Jeopardy game board for students to interact with each other, mainly for the purpose of reviewing for some sort of quiz or exam. The board that I have created, which I will provide details for you guys a little bit later in the presentation. You can find this tool on Super Teacher Tools website, www.superteachertools.us. And honestly, all of the resources found on this website, they can be incorporated into lessons for students of all ages and all content areas. However, my specific game board is intended for 9th grade physical science students. You can see that the topic of my review game is atoms and the periodic table. And in order for me to carry out this activity, I typically rely on obviously a computer to access the game board, a projector to display it for students in front of the classroom. Students can play the game using their own electronic devices, school-provided electronic devices, or in my case, dry erase boards and markers for each group of students. That works perfectly fine for me. This Jeopardy! Game board, it directly aligns with state and national standards. I've laid some of those out for you on this slide. With respect to Ohio's extended learning standards, I have addressed 6 specific standards here. 2 of those main standards, I have PSM2 and PSM3. PSM2 deals specifically with atoms, modeling atoms, ions, and isotopes, all of which are encompassed in my game board. I've listed 3 substandards associated with that topic. You can see PSM2A, B, and C. I won't read those. They're a little lengthy, but you can see them listed on the slide. I've included standard PSM3, which deals specifically with the periodic table, periodic trends of elements, periodic law, and even representative groups. Below, I've included some substandards of that. You can see PSM3A, B, and C. Below that, I've included standards for professional development and for the teaching profession. Here, the activity aligns with implementing engaging strategies, using technology effectively, and allowing for student collaboration. The very last standard, I understand, is a pre-service. It's for pre-service teachers. And although I have already served as an educator for a few years, I am likewise still a student in a graduate program, so I felt necessary to include it because it's important in highlighting planning fair assessment strategies. So observing student performance throughout the review game is going to shed light on the success or the failure of meeting these learning goals. So before I discuss the details of my Jeopardy! Activity, I wanted to take a moment to give you guys a little insight on Super Teacher Tools, what they have to offer, a little shout out to them because it's been a pretty valuable resource to me over the past couple of years. I depend on it for a lot. The website offers a variety of resources as well, and the most utilized are the games, like you can see Jeopardy! And Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Both of them imitate popular TV shows that most of you have probably heard of. There is a rocket review game that's a fast-paced and fun way to review facts. I really like the speed match game. It allows students to drag and drop answers onto the correct question in order to clear the board. Students like that it's quick, fun, they can do that on their own repetitively. I've yet to use the group maker or the seating chart maker, but both of them seem quick and easy to use, saving you the headache of having to deal with writing it all out. I really rely on those extras on the bottom. They come in handy when I'm doing labs or when I'm doing station or task card activities. There's a countdown and a timer I use almost daily or every other day with respect to different labs or activities or even classwork. There's interactive dice that comes in handy when I've used labs that relate to probability, and even an online spinner, which is pretty cool. I haven't used that one yet. But all of these come in handy during a variety of classroom activities, so I suggest checking out that website. So let's get to the basis of the game. I personally have yet to experience what it's like to have a classroom set of electronic devices. I guess I've just not been that lucky, I suppose. And I find that not all of my students have devices. So I usually carry out this review game using dry erase boards and markers. That usually works best for me. There's very little that can go wrong when I use those. I have predetermined groups that I incorporate a variety of abilities. So before students even come to class, I already have the groups picked out, usually with about 4 to 5 students per group. And the purpose for me really picking out the groups beforehand is I tend to have a variety of ability in my class, very strong performing students and very low performing students. And you do not want to discourage students by having one group with all students that have strong ability. That's very discouraging. So I tend to pick groups before the activity. When they come in, I project the game board on the front smartboard. I explain all of the categories to the students, and here you can see those 5 categories on my game board. So you can see parts of an atom, components of the periodic table part 1, components of the periodic table part 2, isotopes, and then I have a miscellaneous category with different intermixing questions of those various categories. Then you can see I have 5 questions in each category. Going down the column, they increase in point value from 10 to 50, and they also increase in difficulty level going down each column. I'd like to include a daily double question for double the points, just like the TV show, sort of an element of surprise. You're not sure which tile it's under. So that's pretty fun. Unlike the TV though, I go right down the list and ask each question to all groups. There's no buzzer. I avoid using a buzzer because it's difficult to hear the difference between which group hit it first, and it avoids conflicts. Instead, just having all groups collectively answer the same question at the same time. I usually give students a short amount of time to write the answer on their dry erase boards. I play cheesy Jeopardy music so that groups cannot hear discussion from other groups, and then they cover their boards until I yell, "Time's up, put your boards up." And the groups with the correct answer, they get the point value listed on the blue tile. So if the answer is incorrect, then I really do not offer any penalty. They don't lose points, they just don't gain the point value on the tile. Typically, I like to use time in between questions to discuss why the answer was the way that it was. Usually there's always one student that didn't understand it, so I like to clear up any sort of confusion. I have students be quiet in between questions, and I discuss that topic very briefly for students. As for the scoring breakdown, on the left you can see that I have an example of a 20-point question here where I ask what the arrow is pointing to. Is it the mass number of the element? Is it the atomic number? Is it the number of neutrons? So say I have 5 teams. You can see the scoreboard on the right. You can put up to 10 teams here. I don't think I've ever had 10 teams, but you can, whatever teams you use, just use those squares. So say I have 5 teams here, and all teams receive 10 points from that previous question. But only teams 1, teams 3, and teams 5 answered this 20-point question correctly. I am able to go directly after the question to the scoreboard, and to the right of that box where the number is, you can see a little plus sign, and it automatically adds that score for me, saving me that hassle of having to calculate it myself. Before I had this website, I used to play Jeopardy, and I'd have a tally on the board or a tally on a sheet of paper, and it's definitely nice to have automatically calculating scoreboard for you. And it's nice that the teams get to see in between each question where their scores are, so I do not have to answer them constantly, "Miss Ferrer, what's our score again?" So that kind of helps. For an activity like this, I usually make it an assignment worth credit. around 10 points. So by choosing to sit out, you lose those points just like you lose out an assignment that you don't do. So I don't think that that's ever happened. Usually people get pretty excited in my classroom to participate in the game. I usually add in incentives, so everyone who participates gets to grab a piece of candy at the end of class, and the number one group, the top group, gets extra credit added to their exam. So I have found that incentives are definitely a huge motivator here with activities like this. So the benefits. I would say that game-based learning is definitely on the rise. Students want to be engaged. They want to participate in experiences that are fun, that are engaging. And I really think that the benefits of review games like this, like Jeopardy, like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, in my opinion, they greatly outweigh the negatives. Rather than, having passive regurgitation of concepts, these games allow students to engage in an interesting sort of deviation from their classroom norm. And such games give a fun-filled alternative to just individual studying and time-consuming study guides that often my students find quite boring. So they allow students to cooperatively and competitively review previous content material. Everyone likes a good competition, and I think overall it can really provide students with a greater level of engagement and satisfaction about what they're understanding. I mean, even personally for myself, I have found that my students retain the information at a much higher level than when I simply give them a paper study guide or if I carry out some sort of standard academic lecture. And combined with some sort of incentive, like the candy and the bonus points I previously referred to, coupled with the fact that there's competitive nature going on, it really gives motivation much more significantly than independent work or working on a paper packet. On the other hand, though, even though I find there to be several positives about game-based learning, I understand that there can be a few negatives as well. There's both functional and social issues that I considered here that could arise while playing. For many teachers, simply finding the time to plan for and implement these non-traditional teaching strategies can be profoundly difficult and can potentially lead to avoiding these methods. It's sometimes much easier for teachers to just hand their students a paper worksheet. At the same time, these activities take time to create. You have to invest the effort into going on and typing each question in and organizing it into a game board for the students, which requires a lot of effort, and sometimes that is a turnoff to teachers. Also, I would say having large class size can make it increasingly difficult to keep kids quiet. I know personally for myself, I average about 25 to 30 kids per class, which is pretty high. So poorly managing an activity like this can be extremely chaotic and loud. So students have to understand the rules before playing. Let's see. I sometimes find that technology can fail you. I would say that could be a drawback. There's always that risk that a program will fail to load or that there's a glitch during game time. That can always happen. Social issues, on the other hand, can serve detrimental as well. The game's competitive in nature, so if regulated poorly, students can turn unfriendly or confrontational. It's just very important to monitor and regulate. The pressure to win, the fear of losing, it can be destructive for students to the learning experience. So groups, they need to be thoroughly thought out prior to. Sometimes allowing students to pick out their groups can just backfire on you, and then other students get discouraged. So those are a few of the drawbacks of having an activity like this. It requires careful planning to make sure that these drawbacks do not occur. So for me, where do I think this gaming move will go next in education? I feel that technology use in gaming has become a regular part of students' lives. We see that every day. As a result, game-based learning is on the rise, and I've seen that in the research that I've engaged in throughout this activity. Stressing the importance of learning environments being both social and active is very important. Finding alternative and engaging ways of presenting information to students is very important. And getting students involved in activities, whether they're games, debates, group discussions, is most assuredly important in a world of ever-growing technology and standards. So I project personally that in the near future, It's going to end up being a mandatory requirement for educators to implement game-based learning throughout their lesson plans. Its importance and effectiveness really comes down to the way that educators apply these game-based learning techniques to their learning practices and to their audience. And if schools can work with educators to build their knowledge, build their confidence of utilizing game-based learning, because it doesn't come easy for everyone, if schools are able to do that, I think that it can serve hugely beneficial for fighting graduation rates, for fixing the disconnect between some students and learning that we know is inevitable in every class. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. If you haven't used Super Teacher Tools in the past, I really strongly suggest checking it out. If you go to the website, again, www.superteachertools.us, it appears to be a little outdated, but the resources have always done the trick in my classroom. My students have usually struggled otherwise if I do not have some sort of interactive review session for them. They've gotten pretty accustomed to that. So it really helps with test reviews and other sort of exam or material review. You can also check out my atoms and periodic table game board by clicking that link below. Thank you so much.